coming to this next following event of the series called Live Italy, Bringing Italian Culture to Yorkshire. That's organized by the Department of Italian at the University of Leeds in collaboration with theatres and cinemas and produces cultures, generally speaking, here in Leeds. Today I'm really grateful to Opera North because for once and all the time they are having us here in a project that we devised together. So I'm going to tell you something more about it before we start the talk that's going to introduce the concert later on today. At Opera North, our main contact is John Ockels, who's project manager, and after working together in a few occasions, John and I started considering what we could do in relation to something that is very interesting for me, which is Sardinian culture in our times. My name is Giulia Sulis, I work for Italian at Leeds, I am Sardinian myself, and I also study contemporary Sardinian literature. So I came from the point of view of reading writers and see how they related to their own specific identity. Then we started how that could be explored beyond literature, which is what you do if you follow our courses at university, and to see how artists nowadays relate to their own ethnic roots, if you want to call them this way. So we started considering what could be done here as part of the Mediterranean season organized by Opera North. And we came up with the idea of this soiree today, organized in 3 parts. We have this talk now, and then we're going to have the concert at 5:15 for 1 hour, and I'm going to say something more about it now, and then the cinema at 7:30. The idea was to present Sardinia throughout the 20th century and up to our times, through the point of view of different artists. I start from the last bit, which is the cinema, because we're going to have a film by a very well-known Italian filmmaker, Michelangelo Antonioni, who is not considered typically Sardinian. There's very little about Sardinia in there. There's only one part, one sort of dream by one of the characters, set in a wonderful paradise-like island on a beach. And that's the Sardinian setting, it's the island of Budelli. And it was the only aspect of Sardinia that you could find on Italian big screens up to the 70s. Okay? Sardinia as a paradise, Sardinia as a remote place with very beautiful beach and the sand. So after that, cinema has evolved, but that was one of the first images that all over the world could be seen from the island of Sardinia. We're talking about a minority culture with limited visibility within Italy and outside Italy. So that's how we're going to conclude the soiree tonight, with Sardinia seen through the eyes of Michelangelo Antonioni in 1964. So just one sort of parenthesis in the life of the busy Italian bourgeoisie of the time. But before that, we wanted, and this is what we're going to talk about now, to see how a young artist, people of my generation, could link to her own Sardinian roots. And we wanted to see someone who has knowledge of Sardinia, but also of other worlds, which is what many of us have in this room. People who travel, live in different countries, and still link to their own origins. So in this discussion that has been ongoing for a while together with Opera North, we found an artist who could represent with her own personal journey all of this. And this artist is Elena Piras, who's sitting next to me. And I'm very grateful to Elena for coming here today. Why Elena? Elena is from Sardinia, from the northern side of the island, and I'm from the southern part, so we have a balance between the two sides. She's from Sassari, and she's a very talented singer and guitar player. She has a very strong, deep interest for folk music in the highest sense, meaning of the word. She has explored the folk music of her own family and region, and there are already differences between the music she knows from the north of the island and the music I know from the south. But that was not enough for her. So also as part of a personal journey in life, she moved to the UK in the late 90s, and she has been living in the UK since then. She has been in London, then she moved to Scotland. In the last few years, she's lived in the Shetland Islands. So we wanted her to be here today because in this journey, she has picked on different music traditions. Adding to the Sardinian one, she has explored Bulgarian music tradition and Scottish, Gaelic music tradition. They all add up to her repertoire, as they are also cultures that have adopted her somehow. So she is Sardinian, and culturally, musically, she's also Bulgarian, Scottish, Gaelic. She has used her strong Sardinian identity to be free to explore other identities and let them to enrich herself. This is also the reason why we wanted another person for this conversation today to add a point of view which was not from Sardinia, which was not so similar to the pathway that somehow Elena and me share, okay, coming from an island, going to another island, exploring a different culture. So we invited here today Andy Morgan, who's sitting on the right. Thank you, Andy, who is a prolific music journalist and writer who has explored world music with a specific attention for the Mediterranean and especially North Africa. So not so far geographically from Sardinia, very far culturally, it could seem, because one is the south of Europe, the south of Italy, European culture, the other is North African cultures, but still the borders of this Mediterranean Sea, that comes to be seen nowadays as such a problematic area politically and socially, with all the tragedies we are witnessing recently. We wanted Andy to be here because he brings another point of view on folk music, big encounters of cultures, crossing of cultures, experimenting with different music traditions, looking at cultures of minorities in the globalized age we live in through the lens of music. So I'm very, very pleased to have this conversation today. I'm also happy on a personal note because I just have to tell you this, today in Sardinia, in Italy is Labor Day. In Sardinia is also the day of celebration of a saint, which is called Sant'Efisio, and he's considered the saint who helped the town of Cagliari, my town in the south, to escape from the plague, the big plague of 1650 in Europe. And as a way of thanking the saint for his protection, from the year 1656, the town of Sardinia, the municipality, organizes a big religious procession that has all folk groups from all over the island to join the procession and thanking the saint. So today is, in some sense, it's a strong Sardinian day, religiously, but more than religiously, I say, in the sense of the Sardinian identity. And I'm very proud to celebrate it today with this conversation, which shows Sardinia as a specific culture, but in continuous conversation with other cultures, like those of the people sitting here today, sitting in the public, and marks this celebration here in the town of Leeds that has me as one of its inhabitants nowadays. So I will stop talking now, maybe I will say something at the end, and we can just start this very relaxed conversation. There will be time at the end for having all the people present here included. So if you have questions, feel free to ask them at the end. Grazie.
Thanks you all for coming. This is a very significant weekend for Elena because she's just made an amazingly arduous journey from Shetland, but much more complicated than I ever would have thought. And she's not going back there. She's actually moving to Wales, to Cardiff. This is after 3 years, I believe, in Shetland. So my first question was going to be, why are you moving?
Well, I very much go, can people hear me okay? Because I can't hear myself amplified, so I'm wondering. I am very much a believer in sort of giving people and places the time they deserve. And I think I've done what I can do in Shetland just now. And I picked up what I wanted from there, because I needed to live on one of the Scottish Islands to see what it was like. I'm a little bit like a traveller myself. I tend to sort of go and explore places because I can't really read very much. I am vision impaired, so for me, I'm more isolated, so I need to experience it in other ways. And one of the ways is by living in a place and by sort of talking to people and listening to their music and just really be there to absorb the place. And a holiday is not sufficient for that. We all know it. So, but also circumstances. I was travelling a lot from Shetland, almost 3 weeks, every 3 weeks for a month. I was on a boat for 12 to 15 hours, and that's each way, on the way down and on the way back. So 15 hours each. And, then, it was followed by a train journey, which was very long as well, depending on where I was going to go. To go to Cardiff, it takes 24 hours if you do it overland, and it's really tiring. And if you've got lots of work to do, it's the last thing you want is to be tired. So I just made the decision to go because I was travelling, beginning to travel quite a lot, and Wales is better placed in the geographical map of Britain to jump on a train or fly from. So.
You seem to be a seasoned traveller. Like moving is in your blood, because you came to England to go to a school for the blind in Herefordshire, and then that led to encounters with musicians, etc., etc. But that leads me to a question I often wonder about myself, is what makes a place home?
I've often asked these questions to myself, and I have not found an answer yet. And I kind of feel that I don't have a home yet. I haven't found it. I haven't found a place where I say, this is where I want to be, this is where I'm going to die. When they say when you reach 40, you're going to ask yourself these questions. I've been asking them since I was 18. Still haven't found an answer. What makes a home? I think a home is a place to rest. A place, for an artist like me, finding a place to rest is difficult because I work from home a lot. There's a lot of listening, writing arrangements, and writing songs in my case, and working on languages. I speak 6 languages, so I've learned several in my stay here, during my stay here in Britain, and it's been hard work, and I don't know. A home is a place to rest, a place to be with your family, and I haven't got that yet.
So, to go back to your roots then, let's not call it your home, because it's not your home.
No.
It's Sassari in north-western Sardinia, I believe, yeah.
Yes.
Tell me a bit about the place. If you can just describe the place to me, the landscape around it.
Well, we're 5 kilometers from the sea, and so you're not far away from the sea at all. And my parents tell me you can see it from the house. So I don't know if you can, because I've never seen it. And we have Sassari is a very busy city, and at some point it used to be the noisiest in Italy because of the traffic. And it was quite an antithesis to actually where I lived. I lived near the hospital, and it's not meant to be the noisiest place in Italy, near the hospital, and it was quite alarming actually. But we had a 500-year Spanish domination, so the university, the main building of the university where the Faculty of Law is based, is a Spanish building, and it's beautiful. It's got this huge marble staircase, and the whole architecture is Spanish. But then we have also the typical medieval streets, very, very narrow, very dark, with tall houses which look really, really ragged from the outside, but actually they're fantastic looking inside, and you would never imagine that there could be something like that. And you know, some of the streets are smelly. And when I was little, you had a lot of craftsmen in these streets working from their house, but they would work on the actual doorstep of their home, because that's where they could sell their goods as well. So there was that tradition there as well, which is, I believe, linked to North Africa as well. There's a lot of people that do that. And they have the market in there. And then you've got the other side of the city, which is a little bit posher, where you have the banks and the posh shops, and still with obviously the Italian architectural structures in there. And then obviously, you know, the residential places, which are modern buildings. I call them plastic. Yes.
But your father came from a little village quite close, didn't he, Oslo?
Yes.
And you said that he came essentially from a rural farming family. Is
Yes,
that right?
he did.
And music was absolutely part and parcel of that old life. Can you explain a bit how?
Yeah, well, he sang in his village choir, and but also music is part of that that life. When they went to harvest the vineyard that my grandfather worked, and the land that he worked, basically they used to sit for lunch, and the lunches and the harvest meal would last for a long, long time. You know, 2 or 3 hours you'd be sitting at this table, and afterwards people would start singing. And this would happen every time there was a gathering of people with friends and family. So singing was in our bones since we were very young. And for me to burst into song and walk on the streets, it was very natural. And all Sardinian people do it, and it's very normal. But when you go to mainland Italy and then subsequently to Britain and Europe, you kind of see that this doesn't exist. So we have to stop ourselves, because they're considered as mad.
I mean, like Shetland, Sardinia has this incredible musical culture, which
Yes.
I would say the rest of the world is only really beginning to appreciate, And I think what we need is a quick tour around some of the main kind of forms of music and a bit of an explanation.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
We're gonna hear a few songs. We're not going to play them all. We're just going to play snippets of it for you to sort of show you the differences, even within one small place, how different the singing is, and how ornate and things change among the different types of singing, just within Sardinia and within the different parts of the island as well. The first song we're going to hear is called Canto in Re, and it's actually, if you hear this guitar part at the beginning, it's a very, very traditional Sardinian way of playing guitar, which many guitarists aspire to. I remember meeting somebody who had specifically bought a guitar especially made to play Sardinian music. It's called a chitarra preparata, because it's a very, very technical way of playing. I can't do it, so don't expect me to play it today because it's not me. But when you hear Sardinian radio, this way of playing is very, very common, and there's many songs played the same way. So we canto in Re.
Sorry to interrupt. I was trying to say there's a little hint there of flamenco. Am I dreaming?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now this song means canto in re means song in D. Okay, and there's lots of songs written this way, and it meant sing, or nightingale, sing in this beautiful plant, on this beautiful tree. It's a really, really ornate way of singing, and this way, I've specifically chosen a woman. Her name is Maria Teresa Cano, and because a lot of songs and a lot of singing in Sardinia is done by men, but actually there's some women that do it too, and I think they should be praised and heard as well as with men. I'm a strong believer of that, actually.
There's another style which has become well known,
yes,
partly thanks to the fact that Peter Gabriel has got a holiday home on this famous Emerald Coast, which is a very beautiful and now very prized part of Sardinia, and has obviously fallen in love with the music and produced a band from there called the Tenores de Vita. But tell us a bit about the Tenores tradition.
Well, the Tenores tradition is based mainly in the inside of the island, the actual centre where all the mountains are, or in the interior. And it's a very closed culture, very conservative, and they tend to have quite a lot of singing, polyphonic singing. It's the famous Sardinian throat polyphonic singing that we're going to hear now. And it's unaccompanied, and it's very, very attached to the culture of the shepherds. You find a lot of choirs made of shepherds, and they go around the island on all the festivals to sing. This one is the coro of Santa Sarbana, which is a little village in the Nuoro area. Nuoro is the third city in Sardinia.
Regina devumari ubare salva en artisedu ubare salva en artisedu ubare salva en artisedu zulitano zulamigu zulitano zulamigu debilando debilando debilando
I hope you'll all agree that is an absolutely extraordinary sound. It doesn't sound European. That's what I find so fascinating. In fact, the thing that it closely reminds me of is Tuvan throat singing. I mean, in the backing, that kind of the tonalities. It's really extraordinary.
Yes, it's one of the things that I would like to work on actually, simply because they've still not found a woman that can join them doing these things. I believe they tried it with Elena Ledda, who's another very, very important exponent of Sardinian music, and who's tried very much to do different things with Sardinian music and bring new songs as well. But you need to have a specific way and knowledge of your voice to sort of be able to do this kind of singing. And as you notice, I don't know if there are any musicians in the audience here, but they change the key halfway through the song and then they go back down. I'll give you an example at the end of the concert today. It's done with the Ave Maria as well. It carries that tradition, and it's very difficult if you're doing it unaccompanied to actually do that. You have to keep an eye on things very, very closely.
Time's racing away like it always does, so maybe we should just choose one more.
Yes. I would choose the third song, which is the Canto a Ballo. It's again another big tradition in Sardinia. There's a lot of folk groups that do dancing, and the dancing is normally accompanied by an accordion and a guitar, or an accordion on its own, and it's very rare that there are singers as well, but they will dance with their traditional costume from their village on the stage. There are different types of dancing, but this is an example, and it comes from the south of the island.
because it's part of the tradition of lullabies.
Yes.
And it's something that many children, even those who hasn't grown up in a strong Sardinian-oriented culture, would be familiar with, like me for my grandmother singing to me when I was a child. It's not specifically this one, but this kind of tradition.
Sure, let's have the thought.
Bella la che è ricca, bella la che è ricca, bella la che è ricca, bella la che è ricca. Bella la che è ricca, bella la che è ricca, male tanta sa idea, sa ricca son tu bella, sa bella son poverita. Oi di ridella, oi di ridella, oi di ridella. Ande bola bola bola, ande bola bolo meu, e cosa la è vita mia, su di mai non credi, mi va salì, se mi va salina neu, ande bola bolo meu, ande bola bola bola, ande bola bola bola, abilità.
It's so beautiful, I'm glad we had that, thank you.
Yeah, just a couple of things on those. I just wanted to point out that the little dancing song that we heard had some bells at the beginning, which is another very, very famous Sardinian tradition of the mamutones. The mamutones are people wearing masks with a lot of very heavy sheep's bells on them, and they dance around with these masks and they parade around carnival time, but also during the big processions that Giuliana was talking about before. And what they do is they actually have a lasso. So if you're watching one of these parades, and you're a woman, you have to watch because they might catch you, and they look quite scary as well. So yeah, that's what the only thing I want to say about that.
And I definitely heard what I always called the Arab blue note in there.
Yes,
you
yes, I
know,
do.
and which also obviously tells us what is so obvious, is that the Mediterranean is in many ways a homogeneous space, and the tragedy of what's been going on there recently is for me a kind of perversion of what the Mediterranean actually is. You know, a place where the free exchange of culture and people has long been a reality, and somehow we're trying to stop it. You were involved well, in a very, very difficult experience, which was the bombings in London in July 2005. And we were talking before this, and you were saying that it really obviously had a huge effect on you, and was one of the impulses for you to actually move up to Scotland. Can you just talk us through that?
Yes, I found myself in this situation. I was doing a very, very common thing for many people with disabilities at that time, which was I was out of work, and I had to be seen by the job centre to be looking for work. So I was going to be to do a trial day for this company, actually helping to find work for people with disabilities. So I had to make my way from Islington, which is where I lived, to Royal Oak in Hammersmith, or Baldock Road in Hammersmith. And it was quite a long journey, and I set off quite early, and I found myself at the time in King's Cross Station changing from the Victoria line to the Hammersmith and City line. Well, I never made it, of course, to the place in Baldock Road. And I happened to hear the explosion at King's Cross Station while I was leaving the station, and I don't remember very much actually between then and finding myself in an office in Baker Street, having a cup of tea and trying to contact my family on my phone. And I was traumatized, but without knowing why and how, and I had hearing problems, and I didn't know I had them until a couple of years later when I was in Glasgow, when the penny started to drop in a way, and I knew I had tinnitus, I knew I could hear this sound in my ears, and I knew I was becoming very irritable to busy traffic. So that was becoming a huge problem for me. We needed to listen to traffic as blind people, and judging the road was becoming difficult and a liability. I was a liability. So I decided that I couldn't do London anymore, and I was singing in the Bulgarian choir at that time, and I was finding it difficult to harmonize, and I had to learn the songs like as if they were a song with no harmonies. I mean, they say to anybody who does singing that when you're learning a part, you have to learn it like as if it was its own song. And actually, you don't appreciate how true this is if you can't hear well. And you have to make it your own, really. It was very, very difficult, and I didn't know I had a problem, and everybody was, was asking themselves what was going on, why is this happening? And so I decided that I was going to try somewhere else, and I was very taken by Scottish music, and I thought, I'm going to try Scotland. And so 6 months later, I moved to Edinburgh.
And what was it about the music? Because you said there's a spirit in the music.
Yes. I say this on my own website, that in my opinion, Scottish music, and Celtic music in general, but the Scots have it in the blood, they actually reflect very much what their struggles were, what their feelings were, whether they were positive or feelings of war, feelings of rebellion, feelings of fight, I don't know, anything that's to do with their culture, and isolation as well, the clearances, we all know that, all their history. And they reflect it very much in the songs. They actually portray across exactly what they're feeling. And I have never found it in the other cultures that I've come across very much. And when I arrived, I couldn't really understand the language. I mean, Gaelic wasn't really something that I had come across before. But it portrayed that to me, it gave me that message, and I felt that Scotland was the place for me to go, to interpret, and actually continue my fight in my life, to carry on.
But this leads me to something that I often think about, because my mother's Bulgarian, and I, like everyone, well, like many people, I fell in love with Bulgarian music when it became this phenomenon in the West with the Mystère de Bois Bulgare in the 1990s, and I worked with Bulgarian musicians, etc. But I was quite dismayed to go to Bulgaria and find how many people actually detested Bulgarian music, because it had been rammed down their throats as this kind of as this flag that they all had to salute, and a great emblem of their culture, and which they had to recognise whether they wanted to or not. And again, it comes to this very, I think, important aspect of folk culture. Because folk culture is it's often a weapon. Giuliano, I know that you've written about this as well. The language, the music, is used as artists as a kind of battering ram to break down indifference, to break down the crushing, feeling of being a minority in a huge world that really doesn't know much about you and doesn't care much about you. But it can also be a straitjacket, can't it? It can also be something that where you say, for a Scottish artist, let's say you're an artist living in the Western Isles, people might say, well, you've got to sing in the Gaelic, and whereas in fact you might not want to sing in the Gaelic, you might not even want to have a fiddle in your band, you might want to play electronic music instead, etc. So this must be a big issue in Sardinia, where a question of culture is so politically charged and language is so politically charged.
Yeah, just a few elements. Sardinia is part of Italy since the 18th century. It went through centuries of Spanish domination. It has been a colony, that's our general perception, Sardinia, of many different powers outside of the islands. Yet it managed to preserve a specific identity throughout the centuries. As you said, as we were discussing also with Elena earlier, it can be that this powerful sense of being different, wanting to oppose your difference to homologation, especially the one imposed by the national state, let's say, or by the globalized Western culture, could be felt not necessarily an act of liberation, but an imposition that as Sardinian, you have to state all the time that you are Sardinian. And sometimes when you are young, you don't want to be different. You just want to sing English pop music and to experiment with rock. And even if you don't understand the language, the English language, you use it. And you want to explore, you want to travel, you want to be free of this straight jacket of your own identity. Something similar happens with the language. Sardinia is a special region in the Italian state, regione a statuto speciale, like Sicily, like some of the regions in the north. It's recognized. Sardinian language is a minority language protected by law, recognized as such by law. But it can be difficult to deal with this excess of speciality. So for artists, and I think also for the normal people, it's always a tension between being like the others and preserving your diversity. And the problem is the balance between these two points. So for example, in recent years, I think at least since the late 90s, we have many writers, filmmakers, musicians who are all interested in depicting Sardinia and talking about Sardinia. So most of the work is Sardinian based. There is an obsession of self-representation in the arts, but they want to do it in their own way. Which is the way of people born, I don't know, in the 90s and the 80s, who are exposed to all the cultures of the world at the same time, so they cannot be only different. This tension between difference and sameness, or being different within a same culture, that is bringing the best results artistically.
Yeah, and also how you perceive these songs, because it's almost like there's in all these traditions, there's what I call a pre-innocence and a post-innocence. And when Elena talked to me earlier before today about her father singing songs in the grape picking, it's like there was no self-consciousness that these songs were some almighty cultural treasure. It's just something like that they did, and our culture is now so kind of diffuse and so multifaceted. But I always think in our culture it's the same as Christmas. You know, for us it's like Christmas. Yeah, well, we cut down this tree and we put little balls on it, and it's just what we do, you know. And then some anthropologists might come from the outside and say, hey, well, that's an amazing tradition, you know. And yeah, for us it's just... So I wanted to ask Elena especially how that played out in her life, how these songs that were just like songs, like almost like nursery rhymes that you sang when you were young, and then suddenly as you grow old and as you realise their value, your relationship with them changes.
Well, I think we were discussing this earlier. I think it's a process that everybody goes through. It's to do with maturity. When you're growing up as a little child, you don't really understand. It's given to you and it's there and you've got it. Then you become a teenager, and I mean, my first album was Tracy Chapman, you know, talking about a revolution and all that kind of stuff, you know. So really, it was completely different, and I was very taken by the pop tradition, and at the same time I was singing in church, and I was doing all sorts of other things. And to be honest, I had really almost like a reject, because I knew that as a Sardinian I had to really push to make it in the world, because I was from an island and the rest of Italy wouldn't consider me anything. You know, I was a minority. You know, you go to the north of Italy, there's all these stories I would be discriminated against just because of my origins. And my surname couldn't be any more obvious Sardinian. I mean, there's everybody's called Piros in Sardinia, you know? Or Suris. Or Suris, yes. So, you know, you couldn't have anything worse than that. And then there was my disability that was playing against me, and all the you know, costumes and sort of pictures that people paint of a disabled person. And I had that to overcome as well. So really, it's a question of maturity, and you don't understand the meaning of these things and the damage in a way that people do to them because they're rebelling against it. But it's something that's to do with being a teenager. You rebel against everything anyway at that age. And it can make a huge impact on the rest of your life. But when you go away from the place of birth, in my case, by listening to other traditions, it made me see the value of these traditions and how this could actually make the island of Sardinia what it is now and where it was before, to understand what it was before. And I could understand, for instance, the critics that were written by people on Sardinian poetry, which as a teenager at school I couldn't understand, I had no idea. And then my teachers would ask me, oh, can you please write a critique of this poem? And I thought, you must be joking. Because to me it doesn't have any meanings, it just says this and that. And my critique was, I don't know, 5 lines long. And a teenager just can't portray that. They haven't got the skills, because they haven't got the experience of life, they haven't seen anything else. And it's difficult to come up with these. It's something that one acquires later, I think.
And we unfortunately only got a few minutes left, so I wanted to give everyone here the chance to ask a question if they wanted to ask one.
Can I ask a question to Elena before we go? Sorry. Just the privilege of the organizer now. In the concert, and I think there is the set list circulating that you're going to do in 1 hour. You are exploring these 3 traditions, mainly the Sardinian, Scottish, and the Bulgarian, and they are all there in your personal interpretation and connections of the various songs. I just wanted, since you talk about Sardinia, to ask you if you can say something about the 2 songs, the 2 Sardinian songs that you have selected to the concert, cioè Non Posso Riposare and the Ave Maria. I'm sure you're going to say something later on, but why these 2 songs? It's only 2, but they're very symbolic, very beautiful in my opinion as well. Why are they important for you?
Well, Non Posso Riposare is a song that I have known since, I don't know, must have been 5 when I came across the song. And I remember, I tell this story often to people when we do folk workshops and stuff, and if I'm asked to sing something. I listened to this song. My father had bought a tape with this song on it. They were all going on about this tape, and we all sat around, or stood in fact, around the tape recorder. At that time, I was in primary school, and they recorded a lot of things for me to listen to on this tape recorder. And it lived in the kitchen, on the dishwasher. So they all stood around the dishwasher to listen to this song, and it was there, and it was like an icon, and it was always there, and everybody went quiet. And I kind of decided to ask a question, as little children do. It's like, why are they all standing right round about the dishwasher? It's can we not sit down and listen to this song instead? But it's a symbolic song for me, and it was the only song I could think about. When I came to Scotland, they asked me, why can you not sing Sardinian songs? And I said, well, I don't really do Sardinian songs. It's not something that I've ever done. So I decided that this song was in my head, and I went to sing it then, and that's where I started. The Ave Maria the other hand, has got a completely different meaning. I have sung since the age of 7, and I was asked to sing at many weddings and at many other ceremonies, and the Ave Maria is one of the main things that one sings at weddings. It's requested by the bride and groom, or by the people during the lunch or dinner after the wedding. And so I found myself singing this song a lot. And then, obviously, when I came to the UK, I didn't sing it until I went to Scotland, and people asked me to do it. And that's why I've chosen those 2 songs, because A, they are iconic for Sardinia, and B, they're symbolic for me as a person and for my life, really.
So, later on, you hopefully will come to the concert and you will hear the musical representation of this incredible journey that Elena has made and is still making this weekend, the new chapter beginning. And I must say, having been quite familiar with Bulgarian music because of my own roots, when I heard her sing Bulgarian, Bulgarian song, and shut my eyes. I found it hard to put a piece of cigarette paper in between the sound I was hearing and the sound that I'd so often heard from my mother's records and when I'd been to Bulgaria. So it's going to be a great concert. Thank you very, very much for coming. I've been told to say that each of these parts of this soiree are kind of independent in as much as the organisers would like you to leave the hall, have a drink or whatever, and then come back when the concert starts in half an hour's time. So thank you very much to Gigliola, to Elena, and to you for coming.
And for me, just a final thanks to the Opera North people who made this possible, John Hotels, Hannah Whitcomb, and Jenny Owen, and to the Leeds University, the Ignite funding, all the staff of Italian, and especially the PhD students in Italian, who are also members and part of the Live Italy team, who are worked behind the scenes, like Silvia Bergamini, Alice Franzon, Laura Rossi, and Clara Stella. So thanks to you for being here, and thanks so much to Andy and to Elena, who we're going to listen to in half an hour more or less. Grazie mille.